What is happening, guys? And it is the return of PGA Live Before Lock. Some people thought it was never going to happen. We would call those people skeptics who are wrong. They are absolutely dead wrong, because how could we avoid talking about the Masters this year, Ben? DraftKings, they're sponsoring the show for us. They've got a great deal going on that we're going to be talking about a little bit as we go here, because if you're playing on DraftKings this week, you put a $10 deposit and just opt into that option that they have there on the promos page. You place a $10 deposit on DraftKings and you play for a free chance to win $1 million, because that is going to come with a milli-maker ticket. And that is one of 2 milli-makers in the lobby this weekend for DraftKings. There is the $10 milli-maker, and then there's also the higher stakes one. So multiple millionaire makers. I know, Ben, you've already put a piece of content up on the channel. You got another one coming. We're doing PGA Live Before Lock. I'm going to be doing a video that's focused more on the Sims on the site as well, and some of the players who end up showing up the most in our Sims tools. So do us a favor, guys, here, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because who knows, if you guys support the show a whole bunch, maybe we'll have to start doing more regular golf content. I don't know that we're going to have, multiple milli-makers every single week, but you never know. Maybe there's going to be a scenario where there are for the other majors. So if you guys do support the show, like it, follow the channel, because that is going to indicate to the YouTube algorithm that this is something worth people paying attention to. And then it's going to get more views, and then we can continue doing content like this. So guys, thank you very much for showing up and watching. If you have questions for us, if you are a Stokastic sub, hit me up in the Discord channel. I'm on the lookout for any of those questions. But other than that, I'm excited to talk some Masters. Ben Raza, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Of course. Yeah, it's the Masters. Come on now. This is where it gets real dangerous. I'm excited. Listen, you just talked about it. That's serious. Someone's going to win them. And so why not one of the Stokastic members? I see everyone in chat already, and we're going to get into it. I mean, we still have, 36 hours, something like that. So we've got a little time, and we'll see, but it looks like weather's going to be nice. No crazy things. I like that. I think we got a pretty straight, fair test ahead of us.
Yeah. And by the way, I would be remiss if I did not point this out, because at the PGA show, it is starting off with just an absolute fire comment by Joseph Ramirez, who says he's going to put Angel and Scotty in his Millie lineup. Any more guys who went to the Slammer. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, because obviously it correlates to players that have been arrested or served jail time in recent times. Is there anybody else on the slate that's done hard time, Ben? We know Scotty. He was almost locked up for life.
He certainly was. So again, it's nice to see people really listening. I talked about correlation stacks, skill set stacks, prison stacks. I didn't really put that in, but I inferred it. And it's nice to see that people are taking the next step. The game's evolving. I think there's only 2, but I like the way, yeah. Shout out to Angel, out of South American prison and straight to Augusta, apparently.
The other thing that we could, not the most serious question, but if we don't have other golfers that we could roster who have gone to prison, of the golfers on the slate, who is most likely to go to prison? Because I think I have the answer.
Ooh, let's see. Ooh. Phil?
Yeah. That to me is the easy answer.
That's the answer.
I mean, we've seen the insider trading stuff when it comes to Phil. We've seen, like some other kind of, shady business deals that he's potentially been in. So if you want to take the contrarian GPP play and try to get a leg up on the field in your lineup there, Joseph, throw Phil Mickelson in there for added correlation.
There we go. But no, listen, the Masters of the 4 majors. I think the Masters is in a lot of ways the most unique, because it's not unique. Like, we play at Augusta every year. It's not a rotation. You have a field where past champions can come in, and it's invitation only, and you have weird cut rules. So like, it's a fascinating game theory on top of it's the first major of the season. And obviously I think for most it's their favorite.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and start looking at the slate here. And I was just looking through, like, our projections just went live on the site, and I was just doing the NBA show. So I was looking to see which pages it is that are updated as of right now. So Top Golfers tool, that'll be updated in short order. But for now, I think we could just look at some of the golfers that we have projected the best. And I think we should start at the top and work our way down, Ben. Where I think we have to start here is by talking about Scotty Scheffler. And on a couple of, because he's kind of on a tier of his own. We're talking about pay. Like, he's the pay up option of pay up options. Tier of his own. tons of contests as of late where we've seen him come in 30, 40% owned, but he's in a little bit of a drought. It's been, 6 tournaments in a row that he hasn't won, which is hilarious because you get some guys like Jordan Spieth hasn't won. Jordan Spieth hasn't won. Like Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods have won before Spieth has won most recently. So like we talk about somebody like Scotty being on a winless streak when there's other prominent golfers who literally haven't won in like many, many years. But what do you want to do with Scotty Scheffler for this slate where you got a guy in Scotty who pretty clearly to me is the number 1 golfer in the world, but there is some sort of public sentiment that he's not as dominant of a number 1 as he's been in previous years. And then on top of it as well, you have to pay a lot for him. He's $12,400 on DraftKings. The next most expensive golfer is Rory McIlroy at 11-1. So there's a $1,300 price difference between him and any other golfer on the slate. He figures to be extremely popular as well. Do you have any takes on Scotty Scheffler? How do you want to handle him for the Masters?
So I think you touched on a couple of really important points. One, dynamic pricing. You see this in the majors where it used to be with DraftKings, you couldn't go above 12,000, and at the bottom, they would dip into the 5s. So you'd have a little different scenario. At the Masters, they kind of did a little of both. Scotty's 12-4. There are no 5K golfers. So it makes it that much tougher to get to him. And I actually think the guy, it's amazing. He's won 2 out of the last 3. He served up a fire menu. I'll give him credit. He absolutely killed the Masters menu this year. Shout out to him. As you know, I'm a big Rory guy, but I think the public is more enamored with Rory, and you really can't play them both. So you have a decision point right at the top. Are you playing Scotty? Are you playing Rory? Are you playing more balanced? And I think for most people, they would choose Rory over Scotty. And I think that'll be reflected as the ownership matures.
Yeah. And let me look at, because I know Jason sent me over a file from our data team of what our current ownership is. So let me pull open that file. I'll let you guess though, as I'm pulling this up. Fun exercise here. What do you think the projected ownership of Scotty is going to be for this Masters tournament?
I'd say 25 to 30%, just on a gut feel.
All right. I just realized that it's not in the file right here. I'm going to go with. So I'm going to agree with you. I'm also going to one up you a little bit. I'm actually going to say 24%. Okay. I think that for some of these contests, the ownership gets a little bit more smoothed out just because of how massive of a field it is, where you have 400,000 entries in the big $10 milli-maker over on DraftKings. And when you see contests like that, it tends to smooth out the ownership a little bit just because you get so much more public money there. So I'm going to go a little bit lower on Scotty just because the price tag is so high. I think it's going to be hard for casual players to fit him into lineups.
What do you think Rory will be on gut feel?
About the same.
I would take also the over.
There's a little bit more public sentiment in favor of Rory right now just because Scotty hasn't won recently. And once again, it's only 6 tournaments that he hasn't won, but there's definitely kind of this public feeling that I've seen on Twitter. Actually, speaking of Phil Mickelson, I don't know if you saw, Phil predicted that Scotty wins 0 tournaments this year.
Look at Phil sticking it to the man. He didn't do it from prison though. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm guilty of this too. So this isn't me saying everyone else is doing this. Everybody is with Rory. He's playing great golf. The storylines write themselves. He's been so close so many times. Is this it? Is this it? No one wants to everyone doesn't want to miss it. Everyone wants to be on Rory if and when he wins this tournament. And I think this year is another example. I mean, you couldn't look at his season and really find much fault with anything leading up to this. And I do think that's going to be fascinating. To me, the more fascinating question is how many rosters will have neither of them.
Ooh. All right. So let's do a little bit of math, right? If we are going to assume, and by the way, Jason said 1 minute, he's going to have the ownership over to me. Let's just roughly assume that both of them are going to be 25% owned.
Okay.
Then we have to do some quick math here. If both of them are 25% owned, then you assume something like 50% of the field, a little bit more than that, like close to probably like 56% of lineups don't have either of them, something like that. Be like
Yeah, I
50
mean,
50.
yeah, I'd say a little. We'll have, so say I'm looking at it like this, just rough math. Say 25% have Scotty, 25% have Rory. I'd say maybe 1 to 2% have both. And then you add that, you have what, 48% left, 47% left. So I'd say a little less than half the field will have neither.
All right. Are you ready for the grand reveal here? Because the
All
ownership
right.
is up now.
Drum roll, please.
Final guess. Final guess.
I'm going to say 25 and 30.
Okay. It is less than that.
Interesting.
But
Good.
we were in the right neighborhood.
Okay.
And by the way, also, the two most popular golfers on the slate. Here comes the reveal. The two most popular golfers on the slate. As I just realized, because I'm an idiot, I clicked on the showdown projections.
I was just saying, I don't know what's going on there. Okay.
It was a delayed reveal. Here we go. Number one most popular projected golfer in our data, it is Rory McIlroy, 23.5%. Number two is Scotty Sheffler at 22.5%. So Ben Raza, you win. You had him projected for more ownership, but very close. And these are the two most popular golfers on the slate. The other golfer that is projected for over 20% ownership is Colin Morikawa. And then we have John Rahm just under 20% owned. Then we start to get into some more of the value options. Corey Connors, he's been playing well as of late. He is your most popular value option, 17.6% projected ownership going to Corey Connors. He's the number one way that right now we're projecting the field goes to save salary, Ben.
And that makes sense because you have to start thinking about it as a lineup now. So if you play Rory or Sheffler, at some point you're going to want some mid-range. And Corey Connors checks so many of those boxes. He doesn't break the bank. He makes cuts. Henley's the same. It's not shocking to think that the correlation of ownership between those guys and, of course, the guys at the top are going to be there because you can't roster Morikawa, Sheffler, and Rory. That's not a thing. So you need those. They're not even values. They're just straight mid-range plays.
Yeah, and we've got our ownership. This is now loaded into the data hub. Pretty convenient place to get a lot of our data. If you guys are looking for all of it in one spot, you go to the data hub, you see the player projections, the ownership, and then also how likely we're projecting them to be optimal. This is data that becomes a little bit more accurate and updates as we get closer to lock. So for right now, I'll be focusing more on the ownership as well as the golfer projections. And no surprise, our two highest projected golfers, Ben, it is Scotty Scheffler. It is Rory McIlroy. If right now you're building one lineup for a single entry, and I tell you, you have to roster Rory or you have to roster Scotty. So you have to pick one of them, but you can't play both, which it's going to be very hard to play both.
Yeah,
So
I'm not playing both.
You have to pick one. Would you go to Scotty or Rory?
I'd go to Rory. Particularly if this holds. Now, I think it becomes a different conversation if Rory's like mid-30s and Scotty's 25%. Now you're starting to really see two different. But if you're telling me I'm choosing about similar ownership, I will take not only feel very good about Rory. That $1,300 makes a big difference. On the first look show yesterday, I built some DraftKings lineups, and the ability to not have to dip into the low sixes, the ability to maybe land in the low sevens, it really helps if you have Rory over Scotty. So I know there's a million ways to do it, but I would start with Rory, yes.
All right. I'm going to lean a little bit more towards the Scotty side. And a lot of it is because like the ownership is negligible between the two, right? I mean, we're talking about 1% difference. That's not the decision-making point here, but I wouldn't be surprised if despite some of the projections, there actually is maybe a little bit more of a lean towards Rory just because of what I mentioned with some of the public sentiment right now. But then also, it's not like Scotty Scheffler has been terrible as of late. Like people look at this drought as being like, you know, like, oh my God, is he falling off or anything? He came in second last week. And the only reason he came in second is because there was just an outlandish finish to the tournament by Min-Woo Lee, where he was just absolutely playing out of his mind. And you get some of these tournaments these days where there's so much talent in the field. Like Scheffler also broke the course record last week in what was it, round 2? Or round 3, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he shot a 62 either on Friday or Saturday. And then Min-Woo Lee shoots like 63 and like 65 to follow that up. Some of these guys just play so well on given weeks that it's kind of impossible for anybody else to win. Like I still think of Scotty as the clear-cut number one golfer in the world. And every single tournament in recent events, he has been 35, 40% owned. And now people have kind of soured on him a little bit. And as a result, like, I don't think he's any worse than he's been in recent tournaments or anything like that. He just hasn't won, so he's being viewed differently. I don't view him any differently than the guy who was 35 to 40% owned in all the tournaments leading up to this.
No, and I think the other thing to realize, and you've seen this, Scheffler's illustrated this, he hasn't won those tournaments. Scroll to the top of some of those tournaments in terms of DraftKings. He's in the winning lineup because if a mid-range player, if a random guy wins, his floor, and I hate to use floor in a sport like golf, has just been so high where he's still giving you placement points and he's still been really, really consistent. So I'm never going to push back on Sheffler. My biggest worry as a Rory backer is Thursday morning we see 10+% gap between the ownership. That would really skew my decision point if I knew that was the case.
Yeah. So when it comes to Rory and Sheffler, I mean, both of them clearly great options. I lean a little bit more towards Scotty. You lean a little bit more towards Rory. But here's another fun talking point, Ben. If you are going to fade both of them, who is your favorite guy to be spending up for who isn't Rory or Scotty? And by default, that's somebody who's lower owned than them as well.
So if I don't play them, Morikawa is the obvious third option, but I'm going to go a little different. I think that makes total sense. I do think there are some scenarios where you can start in the nines, particularly with a guy like Justin Thomas. He's 9,600. He's not going to be nearly as high owned as other people's most expensive option because it's probably going to be Sheffler, Rory, or Morikawa. If you play a guy like Justin Thomas, you easily can play, I could say even maybe two more in the nine, certainly one more. So you have the ability to have like a Xander, JT, a JT, and there's so many guys in the low nines that I think are interesting. So for me, if I don't think one of the big names wins, I might look to that type of build where, JT Decky, JT Brooks, I'm not ruling out the 8K range as my third man in. That salary, I'm going to keep doing this exercise. You're talking, a couple $1,000s to Rory and almost 3K in some scenarios to Sheffler. That is the difference between a mid-6 and a second 9K player.
Yeah, so for me, it's hard for me to not say Bryson because
oh boy,
I mean, Bryson is still one of the top golfers in the world, in my opinion. I actually feel better about Bryson than I do about Jon Rahm at this point in their respective careers. Rahm has really not played well over in LIV. I do think he's probably been a little bit demotivated by the competition. I think he went there also under the assumption that they were going to merge with the PGA Tour, and I think that's just really sapped some of his motivation. Bryson, that has certainly not been the case, where he is somebody who is clearly grinding in all aspects of golf right now, even social media. I watch his YouTube channel a lot, Ben. He's my favorite golf content creator.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. I give Bryson credit. He's the only person in the world, by the way, that went to LIV, and I think it improved his persona in the golf. People like him more somehow. Everyone else became a villain. People like Bryson more these days.
Well, he was really disliked at first when he did his initial press conference when he went to LIV, but then he developed more of a social media presence. And then also, I think he was pretty transparent about what he wanted to do with all the money and what good he wanted to give back to golf. And he's followed through on it. Yes. Where you compare him to somebody like Phil Mickelson or Dustin Johnson. Dustin Johnson barely even plays golf anymore. He just pocketed the money. And he's like, I'm a recreational golfer now with a super famous wife and a super famous father-in-law. Phil Mickelson, also somebody who's just kind of like, all right, he just pocketed a lot of money. Whereas Bryson is also he's actually doing stuff like he's building charities with the money. He's doing things to allow lower income kids to go and play golf and go to golf camps and stuff like that. But also Bryson, I think part of him still being really motivated in a way that these other guys aren't, he's still been working on his game. And I also get the sense that Bryson has been preparing for this event in a really long time in a way that maybe some of the other LIV guys haven't. So not only is he my favorite contrarian spend up option, who also, by the way, I ran stuff through the Sims now that all the ownership and everything is up to date. I come overweight to Bryson. We've got Bryson projected for a little bit over 13% ownership. I got over 20% of Bryson my first run of the Sims, Ben. So he is somebody who I'm definitely going to like spending up for on this slate. And then it's also a nice added benefit that just kind of eyeballing the data. I had a sense I was going to be overweight to Bryson. When I ran stuff through the Sims, it actually ended up being the case as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Bryson, to his credit, he thinks about courses differently. And certainly Augusta, he's shown, I mean, I think some of his comments probably were stupid at the beginning of what he said about, courses and his game, but he has also shown that, with the right conditions, he can take apart these par fives. And, the live conversation is fascinating. The unknown in DFS, I always think is something you want to embrace to an extent because we don't know. And you have Bryson, you have Neiman, who's been tearing it up over there as well. And he's been awful in majors. People are saying talent-wise, he's one of the best players in the world. He has to show it in these type of fields. He's priced like he's one of the best players in the world, and his ownership is pretty fair. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how many people are willing to start with, there's a handful of live guys that if you play them, they're going to be your primary driver in terms of guys you need to really carry your finishing points.
Yeah. And by the way, also, because I think this is fair, who was it in the chat? AJ Worse said, what am I talking about? Rahm has been maybe the most consistent player on live. But there was this assumption when Rahm went to live that he would just be dominant and that he'd be by far the number one guy over there. And if I'm not mistaken, he did win the 2024 individual player championship. But he's also only won 2 tournaments there. He hasn't taken over that tour, which are also smaller fields, no cuts in the way that a lot of people thought they were going to. So I'm more talking about it from a point of expectations. Kind of like a lot of times we'll talk about a star caliber NBA player, be like, oh, this guy sucks lately, but it's really just relative to what's the expectation or their baseline performance. And maybe other people just felt differently, but versus what was expected from Rahm when he went to live, I think he's been below expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have I think the biggest thing for me is how much do I count what a guy's doing on live? Do I care at all? Do I think that they can turn it on and off like a light switch and that Rahm will bring his A game? Do I think that there's something to being in the heat of competition more regularly on the PGA Tour? It's very hard to quantify. I tend to think the big names are just that. And then I tend to think you mentioned DJ. I think Cam Smith, some of those guys, I'm not as bullish as I am if I had seen them, the players in all these other tournaments.
Yeah, so we'll see what ends up happening with some of the live guys. If I had to rank them for myself for this tournament, price and ownership being considered on the high end, it's Bryson 1 for me, Neiman 2, and then Rahm 3.
We're really close. It would be Neiman 1, Bryson 2, Rahm 3. And then, so this just means, by the way, Brooks should just start measuring out his green jacket because I've seen this story before.
Yeah, we've got Brooks Koepka projected for about 7.5% ownership. He also is fairly expensive at $9,400. And I don't know if this is still going to be the case, but for the longest time, there was just this public bump that Koepka would get at every single major, where no matter what he was projected for, he'd be 1.5x his ownership in all those events. I don't know that there's still that same backing for Koepka as there was at one point, but it was a thing at one point. I am not really getting to very much exposure to him, at least in my initial run of simulations here.
I think that's more relevant at certainly the narrative around US Opens for obvious reasons. I think that's more than the Masters per se with him. So the guy that no one is talking about, and then I know we can move to the mid-range and we got some really cool stuff to talk about. Bear is just sitting there. He was awful last week. He got cut. The injuries, maybe he's going to be the lowest owned of all these guys. However, I do think that that's probably warranted. So I'm not breaking any hot takes here, but he is just lost in his price. He seems clearly overpriced.
Yeah, and last week he was my most rostered golfer by a very wide margin. My third most it was a very tilting week for me, Ben. My third most rostered golfer was Harman.
That's sounds unfortunate because 6 of 6 was somewhat obsolete, and Harman, I got to some. He was sub 5% in a lot of tournaments, so you were getting really good exposure to the actual winner.
My 3 most rostered golfers last week. This is as tilting as it gets. Oberg number 1. Number 2 is Matsuyama. 3 was Harman.
Yeah, that's not it. That's not. There's nothing worse than when you get all the punts right, you spike a winner, and then the guys at the top just no dice. Yeah, I get it. It's just hard for me to click. The opportunity cost of clicking his name this week is as high as it literally could be. You're foregoing 5, 6, 7 other of the best players in the world to click.
Let's start talking about some value, Ben. Unless, do you have any other strong
No.
stances on any guys who are in the 9K plus range?
No, not really. I think you again, I think you can start balanced if you want to. We covered most of them. I will let, or again, you mentioned running some initial sim runs.
Mm-hmm.
If I get crazy leverage on someone I'm not expecting, I'll be very content with that. I may slightly tweak it, but I will see if anyone else pops up. Right now, though, that's my initial thoughts. Yeah.
So I view the 8K range as being pretty weak for the Masters. Not something I'm getting myself a lot of exposure to. I actually don't have, let's see, do I have any golfers in between 9 and 8K? I've got, in my first round, I've got 13% of Zalatoris, and he is the most, but it's such a loaded field. And then there's also kind of cheap guys. Like we looked at the exposure going to Corey Connors. He's somebody who's projected for nearly 20% ownership, but it's very rare that Corey Connors is going to be priced in the 7K range. But that's what happens in a field that's this loaded. So
Yep.
I find this to be a really good slate to be a little bit more stars and scrubs, especially when you consider that the cut is pretty favorable at Augusta, where you're going to have a larger swath of golfers that end up making it through to the weekend. So I personally am going to be playing a lot of golfers in the 7K range paired with some of the spend up options where it'll probably be lineups that are looking like one guy in the 9K range, one guy who's over 10K, and then it's going to be lineup filled in with guys in like the upper to lower 7K range. So unless I'm missing anybody, Ben, is there anybody that you really want to be prioritizing in the 8K range? Because I think a lot of these guys are kind of similar to like Corey Connors or maybe somebody like Thigala, but you're just getting lower price points on them compared to somebody like, Shane Lowry or Russell Henley or something like that. So I'd rather save my money than pay up for some of these guys in the 8K range. But do you see it any differently?
I don't see it differently on a macro level, but there is one guy, and I guess Jeff Ulrich could sense it because we talked about this yesterday. It's Cantlay. I know he's going to get some ownership, but I do really like the spot for him. He played last week in the tornado winds. I don't really care about that. He had a rough Sunday. I think he sets up pretty well. He's got experience around Augusta, as many of these guys do. He's been close without being close, but I actually think he sets up pretty well. So for the most part, I'm right with you. I don't love the range. Hatton, Minwoo, Henley, Will Z, Cam Smith, Bhatia. I could do without most of these guys. You've got Cantlay, and then he's at the dead bottom. I do think Bobby Mack sets up fine. I'm not saying I'm jamming him, but if he comes up and I'm overweight in terms of my sim allocation, I wouldn't alter that. I think he sets up just fine. He's a lefty. A lot of things to like about him.
Wouldn't be surprised if Minwoo Lee gets juiced up a little bit as well, just considering he played extremely well and won last week. He's been somebody, if I'm not mistaken, didn't you have an outright on Minwoo Lee?
I did too. Yeah, it was 2 weeks.
Oh,
He didn't play, but yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Finally, by the mercy of society, I held one. He only got to minus 5,000 live, and then I won a flip basically for him to actually hold. So shout out Minwoo. I kind of hope he gets steamed because if he does, I think it's a pretty easy guy to come in underweight on personally.
Yeah, Minwoo Lee, he's already been somebody who's a public darling, but the idea was, can he get over the hump and actually start winning tournaments? And now that he finally did, I think that's going to have people just feel like, oh, the floodgate is open. He's going to start winning all the time now. So Minwoo Lee, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being closer to like 18% owned or something like that, as opposed to 11% just because he had that most recent win. So somebody like Minwoo Lee, wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a little bit more popular than what his current projection is. Now we start to get into the 7K range, Ben. And then also, because we got a question in Discord, this was coming to us from Braden, aka Russell. He said he wants to build some lineups in the single lineup sims for this week, but he isn't quite sure how to use it. So after we go through some of our favorite golfers to be rostering at the different price tiers, then what we'll do is we'll build some lineups in the single lineup sims and take some questions from you guys. But
Sure.
Yeah, if you guys haven't checked out our single lineup sims, number one, you should. But number two, not only available for golf, we also have it as a part of all of our other simulation suite of tools, which if you want to sign up for right now, you get access to all of them, Ben. Absolutely all of them. Promo code, it is all. ALL, $100 off any all access package you guys choose to sign up for. Link down below in the YouTube description box. And this is a hell of a time in the sports calendar. You guys are here. You know the Masters is coming up next week. NBA play-in, followed by the NBA playoffs. That is going to be starting next week. And this weekend, We've got UFC 314, banger of a card. I cannot be more excited for it. Main event, Alexander Volkanovski taking on Diego Lopez. Co-main event, Michael Chandler against Patty Pimblett. That rules. Also going to be a 5-round fight. NHL playoffs, that's coming up. I would be lying to you if I knew what the hell is on the calendar for the NASCAR schedule, but I know that there's NASCAR events going on all the time. So if you guys want to sign up for all of the different packages we have here at Stokastic under one bundle, $100 off using the promo code ALL. This is a promo that is going to be expiring Wednesday night. So if you guys want to take advantage of this and get access to all of the tools on our site for a discount, we very rarely discount the all access package, but it's such a great time in the sports calendar that we want to do something to give people a more affordable way to get access to all of our tools. Promo code ALL, link down below in the YouTube description box. Do not miss out on this opportunity. Deal is going to be ending Wednesday at midnight. 7K range, Ben. If you can only roster one golfer in this range, who's your pick?
Ooh, 7K. So it is a lot harder, by the way. The 8K range is weak. There's a couple guys. The 7K range is loaded.
Yeah.
You have all sorts of players. I think most people would say Corey Connors. I would not say that.
I've got an unpopular answer.
I have unpopular answers. That's not the problem. I'm just saying, I'm just thinking, how much do I want to punish myself? Because part of me wants to say Tony Finau. He's sub 10%. He's in a beautiful sandwich spot because he's right below Corey Connors and he's right above Straka. And I do think both of those guys are going to get a lot of love in the ownership game, rightfully so. But is there a world? And chat, you chime in on this. What about Sergio at the bottom? Sergio, former winner. He played well last week. I think Sergio still has something left. He is someone that I am going to have in the player pool this week.
I've got an unfortunate revelation for you, Ben.
Uh-oh. Were you with me?
I have him in 26% of my lineups in the first sim room that I did. So he was my answer as well. I didn't think that was who you were going to say, but yeah, the two guys in the 7K range actually get the most of. It's Sergio number one, and by a pretty decent margin right now. Patrick Reed actually being the second one. Somebody else with some familiarity at the course. But yeah, I think Sergio at $7,100, really good source of salary savings. We've got him projected fairly well for this slate. We've got Sergio right now.
That popular potentially? That's shocking to me.
Yeah, I don't think he's actually going to be this popular. I think it'll come down a little bit. And when I built out the contest pool in the Sims, the ownership was slightly lower there. So I don't think he's going to be quite that popular. I think it'll be more in like the close to 10, maybe the high single digit range for Sergio. But yeah, at $7,100, I do think he's a really good source of salary savings, a little bit of upside in him. And then also at his price point, like what, top 15, and he's probably pretty live to be in the optimal lineup. It's not like we need him to win at this salary.
Oh, not at all. Again, that is something that I actually think it's a mistake for people. Sometimes they target in their mind, here's like the guys that I think have the most win equity at each salary position. I'll just combine them all. And it's like, well, sort of, but you don't need, you can't have, if you can get 6 guys to all win the tournament, you should do that. And change the rules. But sometimes you want guys that you say, I feel really confident in them hitting the first couple pages of the leaderboard, the top 20. They could finish in the top 10 a lot of the times. That's why Corey Connors gets so much ownership. People are not picking him to win the tournament. People are saying he's not getting cut. And I do think Sergio is a decent barometer of that. Cam Young is also down there. Now, I think he's the opposite. I think he is a dark horse to compete. He also truly might run out of golf balls if we get the wrong iron play from him, and that does scare me.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as Sergio goes, number of top 10 appearances at the Masters, like you said, former major winner as well. The only major that he's actually ever won, it was at the Masters, and I think it was in a playoff against Justin Rose.
Yeah, against Rose. Rose missed a somewhat gettable. But that was a crazy. I mean, I could recap all that. Sergio, his ball I thought was lost. I think it was on 13, and yeah, he won in a playoff, and he had, I believe it's the same number of swings and misses in terms of years that Rory is on right now, actually. So Sergio had been so close so many times, but I do think he's a very reliable low 7K option this week.
Yeah, and then also, if memory serves correct, the year after winning the Masters, He ended up
Yes.
breaking the record for the highest score ever on, what is it, the 13th hole, the par 5, where
it's either 13 or 15.
Yeah, 15th hole, where he was just hitting water ball after water ball, where he kept spinning it into the water. And then it was, I don't remember how many he hit in the water, but it was a bunch. It was a bunch. So pretty wide range of outcomes with Sergio, but there's that upside, which makes him a GPP target for me.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think that that's the other thing. And this partly speaks to maybe why he's going to get some ownership. He fits all these different types of builds. You mentioned like you might do like a 2-4 where you have a 10K, a 9K, and then 4 in the 7s. He could easily be that kind of guy. If you go balanced, you could have 3 in the 9s, 3 in the 7s. If you play Sheffler and you punt the 9s and the 8s, you're going to probably have 5 in the 7s or 6s, obviously. He fits that. So he's going to fit a lot of different build types, and that probably does drive up some of that ownership.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go ahead and look at some of the other options in the 7K range. You and I is seemingly on the same page here, which is a little bit scary. We both like Patrick Reed a little bit. We both like Sergio Garcia a little bit. Anybody else who you are really strongly considering in the 7K range?
Yeah, I mean, there's, like I said, there's certainly names. A couple guys that I'm not ruling out. I mentioned Cam Young. And to me, another interesting name, if you want a guy that you think, or at least in my opinion, he sets up well for this course and he is really struggling, that would be Matthew Fitzpatrick. Matthew Fitzpatrick is playing really rough golf. Maybe he turns it on in a major. Maybe that's the case. He looked lost last week. If you look at, the strokes gain data, his irons have been basically horrendous. He's gained in one tournament in 2025 on approach. That's just not good enough. He's lost putting in 5 of 6. So the game is not in good shape. But Matthew Fitzpatrick in the mid 7s, if you would have told me that before 2025, I would say he'd be the most popular play at Augusta. His form has not lived up to the expectations.
Yeah. So for me, one other guy that's also showing up in lineups as of right now is Sepp Straka. That is courtesy of our simulation tools, but I've got Sepp Straka right now in just under 20% of lineup. So he's also looking like a viable option to be paying, or not paying up for, to saving salary with in the 7K range. Those are the 3 I landed on the most here in our first run: Patrick Reed, Sergio Garcia, Sepp Straka. Want to talk about some punt options or anything else that you want to talk about in this price range?
No, again, I think that, this is where ownership is going to ebb and flow. There's going to be guys in the 7s that are sub 5K. A couple guys will be lost there. And then now we get to the true, most likely you're playing these salary savers because you want a combination up top that you have no choice. That would be my guess for most of why you're going down here, but there are plays.
And there's a lot of good golfers, like Aaron Rai, for instance. He's somebody who, other than wearing 2 gloves, and it drives me crazy because
that is shady.
Yeah, because there was a GPP last year that I was live to win that I didn't because he fell apart on, was it the back 9 of round 4 on Sunday? And I'm telling you, Ben, if he wore 1 glove that day, he would have won. But because he wears 2 gloves, wasn't able to end up winning. And I'll hold it against him forever. It looks very stupid as well. But there are golfers who are legitimately good in the 6K range who are almost always priced in like the 8K range. Aaron Rai is one of them. He's somebody who ended up getting myself exposure to. How about for yourself? Who are you willing to take a punt on when you consider we've got so many guys to spend up in the high end that the 6K range becomes much more relevant at Augusta and the Masters than it does for most other DFS tournaments?
Yeah, I'm looking right now, kind of just like scrolling through. And there are names down here. Some of them, I think it's because they haven't played at Augusta before. Aaron Rai would be an example of that. Taylor Pendrith is an example of that, but he really drives the ball well. I love his game if he can just hold it together around the green. And that's a big if, no doubt about it. And then a guy like Benny On, who I actually think sets up well. Now, he may get a little popular because he's got the combination of the playing well, and then he was top 20 here last year. And I do think people look at those. I'm not saying it's not indicative, but like peripheral stats of, oh, he's playing good and he was good here last year. I'll play that guy. But these are guys in the 6,800 type range. If I have to play them as my last man in, I won't hesitate to do that.
I've got one guy I like quite a bit in the 6K range. Josh Gillum actually brought him up in chat, and that's going to be Lucas Glover for me.
I thought you didn't. Lucas Glover, he should take one of
His
Aaron
name
Rodgers.
is his name may be Glover, but he doesn't actually wear two gloves. So
Ah,
it's like a happy balance between him and
okay.
Aaron Rye. A little bit of a slow start to the year for, well, I shouldn't say a slow start to the year for Glover. I say more an inconsistent start to the year because the first 6 tournaments he played in, he missed cuts in 3 of them. He also had a top 5 finish in one of those. But last couple outings, Players Championship, finishes T3. In the Valspar, he finishes T8. And another thing, too, that's been really revolutionary about Lucas Glover, he was always somebody who had a good iron game, but couldn't putt for shit.
Yep.
As he's gotten older, he's kind of figured out how to putt a little bit, and that's really increased his upside. There used to be a point in time where if I was playing PGA DFS, I rostered Lucas Glover, he would drive me crazy because you'd get some of these situations. It's like, hey, look, he's on the green in regulation. He's got a 6-foot putt for birdie. And it's like, oh, look, he bogeyed somehow. So
yeah, quite familiar with that experience. I know what you're talking about.
There was a point in time where he just simply could not putt at all. And that's not the case. It's becoming not necessarily the strength of his game, but it's definitely become a more reliable part of his game. And that's really put him in contention in a lot of tournaments. He's coming in good form as well. I think this is the best he's ever played in his entire career. So coming off back-to-back top 10 finishes and his price point not really reflecting that. Part of that too is because of how early some of the Augusta pricing comes out. I think that is something where some of the recent form of golfers might not necessarily be taken into account for in the pricing because of how early it comes out for this event relative to other tournaments. But I like Lucas Glover as somebody who's not all that popular that you also could save a lot of salary with, give you the flexibility to spend up for a couple of stars.
Yeah, I mean, not that this is more just like interesting than I think indicative. Like Lucas Glover has won a major. Now, granted, it was 15 years ago. It doesn't mean anything, but this was a guy that I think a lot of people said for a long time, if he could putt, he would be a serious threat week in and week out, but he simply couldn't. And now it's like you said, it's not an asset, but it's not a liability as much. And I think that's kind of the takeaway when you look at a guy like that. So I'm not going to push back with that. I'd rather play someone like him than some of these. To me, where it gets a little dangerous in the bottom of the range is when you're playing some of these guys that have limited to no experience. I think maybe their upside might be a little higher, but I'd rather have a guy that's played at Augusta, 10 times and he's made the cut a handful of times because he knows kind of where to miss. They say, with this type of these undulating greens, getting up and down, lightning fast, things like that, it matters. And I think course history is overrated, but the experience and the fit is not. And I think Glover kind of checks some of those boxes.
Anything else that's a priority for you or somebody you're looking to take some punts on? By the way, Glover, I do have in double-digit percentage of lineups my first run of Sims.
So we had a couple just random names that I'll give a yay or nay. Dustin Johnson and Burns are both no for me. I just don't like the way they're playing. Prefer other guys in that range. Schwartzel, I mean, I'm a sucker for playing Charles all the time. I just don't know if I need to get to 6,200. That's my biggest concern. It's not that I even hate the play, but unless you're telling me there's a reason why I can't just play like Denny McCarthy or someone like that, I'm not sure I need to get to Charles, and that's probably a good thing, to be honest.
Yeah, of my first run of Sims, out of my top 150 lineup, Schwartzel's in one of them. So
that could be the one. That could be the one that wins this 400,000 person DraftKings tournament.
Could be.
I doubt it. But Keegan, yeah, if you go off the T stacks, I don't mind that. I'll probably have some Keegan.
All right. So we'll go ahead and build some lineups. We're also going to take some questions from you guys. But first, like we talked about a little bit at the top, there is a great deal over on DraftKings, and Ben's going to tell you a little bit more about it.
All customers are eligible to play free for $1 million with a $10 deposit this week. Here are the terms. 1 per customer, a minimum of a $10 deposit required. The reward issued will be a single-use $10 ticket. Ticket reward is equivalent to site credit only and valid for use on the $10 Fantasy Golf Millionaire Contest. Ticket rewards have no cash value, are non-refundable, non-transferable, and non-withdrawable. Ticket expires April 10th at 7 a.m. Eastern. For terms, visit www.draftkings.com/promotions. Offer ends April 10th at 6:59 a.m. Eastern. If you do have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or 877-8-HOPE-NY. You can also text HOPE-NY at 467-369. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Must be 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions applied. Void where prohibited. Max 1 per customer. Minimum $10 deposit required. One single-use $10 ticket rewarded. Ticket reward is site credit only, valid for use on the $10 Fantasy Golf Millionaire Contest. Ticket reward expires April 10th at 7 a.m. Eastern. For terms, visit www.draftkings.com/promotions. Offer ends April 10th at 6:59 a.m. Eastern. Sponsored by DraftKings.
All right.
That was a lot.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for that. So I'm a little concerned that people might realize that read is not actually Josh doing an impression of you, because it's been hotly debated in the NBA shows whether that is actually you, whether it's Josh doing an impression of you. Nobody actually knows for sure, but now they've heard you go out and say it, and now I think they might. Who knows? But I think they might put 2 and 2 together. But now we could go ahead and we could build out some lineups here using the single lineup sims, which this comes with access to any of our sims packages. And what you could do in here is you could build lineups, you could simulate them, and you get a little bit of feedback from our data on whether it's a good lineup, a great lineup, a mediocre lineup, or an absolute dog shit lineup that you should throw in the trash and rebuild entirely. And we're going to be doing that right now. So we did get that question in Discord from Russell, who said that he wants to use the single lineup sims, but doesn't quite know how to do it. Here's the good news for you. It's the absolute easiest way possible that you could go ahead and build out your lineups, because what you're really doing here is you're just hand building a lineup as you would with a normal lineup. But then at the end of it, you're going to press run contest simulation and you get feedback on whether that lineup is decent or not. So we'll go back and forth here, Ben.
Yeah.
I'll give you first pick. Who do you want to start our lineup with?
I'm going to start with Rory because I think most people are going to be interested in what some of the Rory lineups might look like this week. He's going to be really popular. I think he'll be the most popular play. So let's just see what we can do with a very obvious first choice.
Okay. We're going to start with Rory in the lineup. All right. So you went with Rory. Let's see. If I plug Bryson in here, doesn't give us that much salary to play with, 7,250. We could do it. I'll leave it. Are you okay with it?
Absolutely. I think this is the type of lineups that I really enjoy building. I did a little of this on the first look show because it forces you into decisions. It looks like we're probably going to have I call it a 2-4, where the gap between Bryson and our third player might be several $1,000s. Maybe not, but I'm going to go with an obvious pick. I have a feeling if I didn't take him, you would. We both like him. I'm putting Sergio in there. He's going to be somewhat salary relief. It'll bump up our average salary remaining just a little higher. But now we have 3 players left for 21.9. That's plenty of options.
All right. So now we're still going to need somebody in the 6K range here in all likelihood. If not, let's see. Yeah, I think we're still going to need somebody in the 6K range to save some salary with. So I'm going to go with the guy who I was just talking up a little bit, who I'm going to be having in lineups. Lucas Glover, got him projected for just under 10% ownership, $6,600. This gives us a little bit more flexibility. Now I've got 2 spots left, $76,500 to spend in them. So we have a little bit of salary relief to play around with. So give me your next guy here, Ben, and then I'll probably just plug in whoever projects the best with the remaining salary.
So what I think, again, you have a million 2v2 options here, but to me, lower 7s really gives you options, and Patrick Reed would be that guy. That's going to land you in the Connors, Bobby Mack range for your final player. You could also leave money on the table if you like someone else, but to me, Patrick Reed sets up well. We've got 3 live guys in there, which I think is an interesting wrinkle. And now your last click is very easy. You have multiple really good options.
Yeah, so now when we're looking in the 8K range, let's see, who is it that, also one thing that you could do, this is going to make this easier experience for you in the single lineup sim. If you press this slider, show affordable players, it'll only show you who fits in the lineup, because obviously at this point, we can't go and plug in. Like, it would be cool if we could be like, you know who I'm playing? Scotty Sheffler, Rory McIlroy, Colin Morikawa, but can't actually go ahead and do that. No. So if we now just look at the available players who are projecting the best in our data that are available, we've got Rob McIntyre. We've got Corey Connors. We've got Sepp Straka. You mentioned McIntyre before. He's the one who projects the best. Should we just click on him to fill out the lineup?
I mean, like I said, I really do like Bobby Mack, and I think that he's not going to be sneaky. I don't want to get it twisted like he's some crazy pivot, but at the same time, I think I have him slightly ahead of Connor straight up, and you're getting a little haircut on the ownership as well.
All right. And now also within the single lineup sim, if you guys see, there's a couple of adjustments you can make up top. So for this, we're building lineups for the milli-maker. So I'm going to put it large field contest. That's over 1,000 lineups. Percentage to first, 25%. A lot of people ask me how I figure out 25% to first. $1 million to first, $4 million prize pool. $1 million, that's 25% of 4 million. So you select 25% to first. After that's all situated, run contest sim, and then we'll see what it is that we end up getting to. As far
it's not
as
like the NFL, it's tough. It's tough in golf. These are you don't see those like 140s.
Let's see. Hey, we still got a pretty good lineup here. 8.3% sim ROI. You are right though, where it's not. Golf isn't the same as, say, like NBA, where you could just load in like these surefire value plays, and then you run sims, you get lineups that come up with, like 50, 60, 70% sim ROI. There's for sure an edge in golf. Actually, golf's been one of my more profitable DFS sports dating back to last year, Ben. Part of that is because I did win the $5 for $50,000 over last summer. Help. So that was one of the things that definitely boosted my PGA winnings for last year. So there's definitely an edge to be had, but it's not like the same surefire values you're going to be getting in some other sports or anything like that. But either way, this lineup ended up rating out pretty well. If you do ever run this and get a negative sim ROI line, go back to the drawing board. You could rebuild it. Yep. And we actually got a question here, a super chat from Green Checkmark. He wants us to plug his lineup in for him, Ben. So we'll do that. We'll evaluate it. If it looks good, we'll give it 2 thumbs up. If it doesn't look great, maybe we could do like a 1-for-1 swap and make it look a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm interested to see this because there's, I haven't made any firm decisions yet, but I'm thinking about some of my main lineups, and there's definitely a chance that it starts Rory JT. I like that build. I'm having trouble when you do that of kind of what I think Green Checkmark was doing. Do I dip into the mid-8s with like a Henley, or do I omit what he did at the bottom, which is punting twice, and go more into the 7s instead of the 6s? That's a great question. I'm interested to see what the lineup comes out as here.
And here it is. Rory, Henley, Connors, Justin Thomas, Lucas Glover, Steven Jaeger. With the exception of Jaeger, I think all these guys were golfers I was getting a pretty decent amount of exposure to when I was running stuff through the Sims. So I think this lineup shouldn't rate out poorly.
No.
We'll see though.
I mean, your leverage, if Jaeger somehow plays well, that's not going to be a popular pick. And that's in the ballpark. I'm not saying you can't tweak it, but minus 9% is not something that you can't work around.
Yeah, I wonder if we take Jaeger out, if there's somebody else we could fit in that looks better in our data. Let's see if we just plug Eckroat in. Let's see if that makes a difference. Probably not, but maybe. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you could do. If it was me personally, this is just a personal thing, I would kill Henley and probably boost Eckroat. I'd go down into the 7s twice.
Mike Campbell in the chat saying, Phil, top senior, free money. So yeah, that didn't help plugging in Eckroat into this lineup. But like you said, it's not that far away. Maybe if we were to play around with it a little bit more, maybe take Henley out and replace him with somebody else. And then maybe upgrade Jaeger, like went a little bit cheaper in the Henley spot, and then upgraded Jaeger to say like Sergio. Like maybe instead of Henley, we play somebody in the 7K range and play Sergio at $7,100. Maybe that's something that could end up being a little bit different. So let's see if there was any other questions from Discord. If not, Ben, let's build a Scotty Scheffler lineup, because that's something that's probably going to be of interest to a lot of people. And yeah, no other questions in Discord. If you guys do have questions, hit me up before we finish here. And if you haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget to take advantage of our all promo if you haven't looked at that yet, because we just don't run promos very often for all access packages. And $100 off any all access package it is that you decide is best for you. It includes all of the different sports that we cover here at Stokastic. So take advantage of that offer before it expires Wednesday at midnight. Let's go Scotty Sheffler to begin here, Ben. And now we're going to have to get cheap at some other stages of this lineup. So who do you want to plug in after Scotty?
I'm gonna help us out right off the bat. I'm gonna put in Benyon. I like him in the sixes. I know, like I said, he showed up in majors last year. I don't know if he'll put himself out of it. That's always a possibility, but his around the green game is very strong. He's sub 7, and now 4 spots. We actually have a little more flexibility now.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody saw me looking like an idiot, but trying to search for on, I plugged in AN, and it turns out that obviously like half the people in the field have an AN in their name. So it didn't remove anybody. It was just almost all of the golfers were still, not almost all of them, but there were still a bunch of them there. So anyway, we've got Benny on in here. We've got Scotty Scheffler. I want to go with one other cheap guy in the 7K range. Let's see. Who is it that we didn't play in our last lineup that, oh, you know what? We didn't plug in Sepp Straka in our last lineup. We didn't play Corey Connors in that one either. I'll go to Sepp Straka now.
Okay. So we definitely have some different options. You could pepper the same range 3 more times. You could get into the 8s, and I'm going to do that. I know you're not as bullish on this guy, but I really do like Patrick Cantlay. I think that he's a nice second player to a Scheffler lineup because he's not in the JT range. It comes out to about 20,000 for 2 players, but we'll still have salary. We may have to dip into the 6s again, and we'll deal with it. But I think Cantlay makes a nice addition to a lineup like this.
All right. Go to Patrick Cantlay.
We'll be
also,
right.
we'll do one more lineup after this because I'm seeing a lot of people from chat throw out golfers they want to see us plug in. So we'll open this up to the chat as well. We'll do so one of these lineups, you like Rory. So it's kind of like a Ben lineup where we start with Rory, more of a me lineup where we start with Scotty. And then we'll get a lineup as well from the YouTube chat where you guys could throw in who it is that you want to see us plug in. So start preparing some of your answers for who it is that you guys want to be rostering. And who knows, that could be the milli-maker winning lineup. There was a sim show last year that Lofty and I did together, Ben, where I think it was the lineup with the 3rd highest sim ROI from the contest generator in the sims actually ended up coming. It would have come in. None of us played that exact lineup, but actually would have won the milli maker. And we didn't realize it until after the fact.
Well, hopefully one of these does the same thing. And then hopefully I remember to play it.
All right. So we're going to need a cheap golfer here. I want to get away from guys who we built in the first lineup. So just for the purposes of differentiating a little bit, I'll throw JJ Spawn in here at $6,800. That'll give us some flexibility to go a little bit higher into the 7K range.
Yeah, and again, the 7K range is the easiest range because I think you just have so many players. Certainly, I'm just going to go with, I think, a pretty obvious answer in Theegala. He fits perfectly. But you can mix it up. You know, I talked about Fitzy, Jason Day is there. Really just about risk tolerance, what type of tournament you're playing in, things of that nature. But I think all in all, Theegala would be my choice.
Yeah, and there's a number of golfers here. Wyndham Clark, he's projecting fairly well for us. If you want to leave some salary on the table, there's Sergio Garcia, Patrick Reed, Jason Day. He's also not all that far off, but let's plug in. Let me just sort by salary so it's easier to find him here. All right, go with Sahith, run the sim, and let's see how this one looks. I'm not feeling great about how this might be a little bit too contrarian, some of the options we've picked.
Yeah, this could be, but again, the 400,000 people, I think you do need some of that in there. It's almost like so when you talk about NFL Showdown, I think that's more of an extreme example. Like if you build anything even remotely logical, that's a dupe situation. You know that you have to kind of balance that. And in a tournament this big, if you're really focusing on, I really do think you're going to want somebody that maybe is a little out there to be somewhat different. If you're playing in different tournaments with different structures, I'm not sure I'd go to a lineup like this, but large field GPP, I'm okay with something like this.
All right. And now let's start to see who it is that the audience wants us to build a lineup with. Also, there are ways that I could definitely look at some of our data, some of the boom bust tools, and just see like for sure who the golfers are that we have projected the best relative to their ownerships and salaries. So if we want to, at the end here, after we build out the audience lineup, I'll just to make sure we get one lineup with a pretty good sim ROI. I'll build out one where I'm kind of looking at some of the data and going up more in depth with who it is that our boom bust tool really does like. And then we'll get a lineup that does sim out quite well. But let's see what we have from chat.
Okay.
See,
Looks
Mike
like
Campbell.
got some
Sung
Getry love
JM.
in there.
All right, we've got. Oh, I was gonna say I see Dietrich coming up a bunch, but I just realized that's because Nicholas just keeps typing.
Yeah. Well, he really likes our favorite Belgium golfer, so I can live with that.
All right, we'll do a little bit of a hodgepodge from different people who have thrown in names. All right, so Mike likes Sung J M. Nicholas has made it clear that he likes Dietrich. We've got Greg.
I think Xander is an interesting starting point. You know, he had been hurt. He's starting to play. Obviously, had an unbelievable major season. I'd be interested to see how that looks in a simmed ROI.
Right. Also, just for the record, just for transparency, Coco McGill, Sung J.M. actually is from Korea, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, South Korea.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it was. I thought it was North.
Yeah, I was just saying,
All right.
for obvious. I don't think he would be. That would be quite a story. Clearly, like I said, Kim Jong Un is certainly the best golfer in North Korea. I think we all know that.
Yeah. Kim Jong Il was the one, I believe. With
yes,
the golf
his
story.
father. But maybe he took up golf as well.
Yeah. So I saw John Rahm in the chat from Ross, and now we're just gonna have to fill the lineup in with.
That'll be like
whatever
range.
Yeah, with whatever works at this point. Hey, Russell Henley, easy.
Yeah, definitely Henley.
All right.
This is a weird looking lineup. I like it.
All over the place.
Different. Look, and you see it. Look at the one of the great things about this tool, you get a glimpse of cumulative ownership right there on your screen, and you can see that this is the type of lineup. It's got some guys that are definitely sub 10%.
All right. So not too far off here, negative 10.6% sim ROI. And then also, if you guys are using this tool to build your lineups, one thing that definitely makes a lot of sense to do is if you do have a lineup that's negative sim ROI, look at some of our data, play around with some of the lineup combinations, take some golfers out that maybe don't have the best boom bust data, put some other golfers in that project well. And that's what I'm going to try to do right here to build out a pretty good lineup, and at least by sim ROI. And let's see. So at least in our data, Sergio is somebody who comes up a pretty good amount. So I think that he should sim out pretty well. On the high end, mentioned before, Bryson, he comes out looking pretty good in our data. By the way, as does Xander. Xander, who was in the audience lineup before, he looks pretty good in our data as well. So we've got two more expensive options, one cheaper option in Sergio Garcia. And this leaves us in like the sweet spot range, right in the 7K or upper 7K range. So then we could plug in somebody like Corey Connors at $7,900. And then if we go to Connors, we've got, let's see, $7,700 for two spots. And then we could do a couple of different things here, Ben. We could either go one really cheap spot and then spend up for somebody, or we could go with somebody who is more in the mid-range. We go to 2 7K guys. Which direction do you want to go?
I'm going to say plug in Pendrith and see what that... Him or Denny McCarthy both grade out as really nice value plays. I also objectively like them.
Okay.
And so I know that kind of leaves you in no man's land, but...
Yeah, it's funny. We keep landing on Henley. This is we've only built a few lineups. So we keep landing on Henley.
This will grade out really nicely, though, if you do plug Henley, just for what it's worth.
All right, so let's try one with Henley. Henley does project as a little bit over-owned in our tools, but let's see. Let's see how this one looks. If this Henley lineup, it also is leaving $300 in salary on the table. So one thing that we could do is we could upgrade Pendrith to somebody else, and maybe we could go down a little bit with Henley. But here we go. Yeah. So here's a lineup that actually projected pretty well in the data here. 24.1% sim ROI, which for my money, Ben, I think it's a pretty good way to go out. Would you agree?
I do as well. And again, it doesn't mean, for me, I'm going to work off this blueprint and probably 2v2 this a little bit because I'm not as bullish on Henley. So I might say, okay, I have a great foundation. Maybe I go with a pivot. Maybe I go with Will Z, someone that's, one spot different, but that's a beautiful looking lineup. And again, I know you mentioned this a couple times already. There are so many good sports. The concepts behind this tool work for every sport. So if you're enjoying this and you play the all promo is really something to consider. Again, the information is there for you. It's a big savings, and it's a time of the year where being able to play multiple sports and get these tools for multiple sports is an incredible edge. So when you do that, make sure you hop in Discord, and I'm excited. I'm excited for this milli and 2 millis. Like you said, there are 2 millis out there.
Sponsored by DraftKings here, guys. So if you are going to be playing on DraftKings, which is probably pretty much all of you who are watching, take advantage of the deal because this really is a great offer, especially for some of the lower dollar players out there. $10 deposit, and that is going to come with a $10 ticket to the milli-maker on Thursday. Take advantage of that offer. It is such an easy way to get yourself a little bit of value on the slate. Like, just think of it this way, Ben. If you were normally just going to be playing one milli-maker entry for $10, you could still just play for that same $10, but you're going to be doubling your action for the slate. So really good value opportunity over at DraftKings. Opt into that offer, make the $10 deposit, and get yourself a chance to win $1 million for free with a $10 deposit there. So guys, thank you very much for watching. One more time, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and good luck this weekend.